Hey everybody, welcome back to Dental Unfiltered. I'm Matt Brown, and I'm so excited about this amazing guest episode we have today. We have Stacey Peters here. She's probably one of the greatest startup consultants in history. And a personal note, three amazing women taught me dentistry when I was first in the industry. And I would say Stacey Peters was my number one source. Another lady named Samantha, who now works for me, she was probably my number two. And there's another person who is very private, who works for me now, who's my number three. And Stacy helped me with all my fundamental dental knowledge. One time, there was a time I called her and had to ask her what the term hand speed meant, and she thought that was so funny and cute. But I'm really excited to have her on the show. I'm surprised we haven't done this sooner. She is somebody whose brain I have always valued for the last 5 years. She knew me when I had two legs. That's how long we've known each other. So we're gonna do an awesome episode today, guys. Stacy deals with hundreds of docs like I do, and there's some commonalities she finds in successful docs. And there's a famous book I like called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and he analyzed the most successful men in history and found these commonalities. I think one person that could really highlight that, because she's done everything from real estate to HR to she's done every aspect of the practice with these individuals where I have a very narrow view. I think she could really shine the light on like what is the successful traits she's found in common with docs over her very extensive career. So Stacy, first, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Well, yeah, so yes, I do have quite an extensive career. It started a long, long time ago, working for a dentist when I was very young, and kind of thrown into the clinical side of it also very young. And this was back when like we had to handwrite insurance claims, and we manually develop x-rays. I mean, this is a long time ago. I've seen dentistry come through a lot. And then, after I decided that I would go to hygiene school, I kept getting dragged back into the business side of it. I helped a doctor open up several practices before DSOs were a thing. And I just, instead of working in hygiene, I just kept getting pulled back into the business side of it. And then I worked for Patterson Dental for 10 years and as a practice management trainer. So and then I saw a need in my area for consulting. And at the time I felt like, the consultants that were around were charging a lot of money and really not delivering what I felt was fair. Most of these offices were like really in trouble. And so, for them to, pay a lot of money and just not really be helped, I felt like it was unfair. So I went out on my own and started consulting for doctors who were struggling in their practice. And then I met Jamie and Stephen, who, talked to me about startups. So I thought, yeah, I can either help these doctors and start out on the right foot, or I can continue to fix these broken offices. Hmm. So I just found like the education side of me, I love the education piece. And I just felt like that really to teach doctors how to avoid all these problems right from the start. It just really appealed to me. And so I work nearly exclusively with startups, and I wouldn't change a thing. And that's how we met, Matt. I feel like we were having like a bit of a full circle moment here. Bit of a full
Yeah,
circle moment. I knew you way back when, before the podcast, and I remember thinking
I didn't know
he's
anything.
going to do big things. No, I
I
remember thinking
didn't know
he's going to do big
anything.
things. He's no, you actually you did. You knew a lot more than you gave yourself credit for. But you knew the business. You knew business, and it didn't matter that you didn't know dental business. You knew business, and you knew marketing, and I could see that right from the start. So yeah, I feel like we're having like a super full full circle moment.
Yeah, no, it's ideal practice. Real quick, and we have to get into the episode part of this. Meant so much to me, just so listeners know. I don't know how many of you know I have one leg. I got diagnosed with cancer a few years ago, and Ideal was so critical to us. I flew to Florida to tell Steven in person, so he knew we were still going to be dedicated to your clients. And Steven was like, "Why did you come to Florida to tell me this?" I was like, "You're critical to my business, and I want you to know, even though this is happening, nothing's going to go wrong with our service. It's still going to be the same standard." And we were very dedicated. We are very dedicated to each other, and it's been a long relationship, and it's been something I've thoroughly enjoyed. So, getting into the episode, so Stacy, you have had a long career, and you've seen the technology progression. You've gotten this awesome view of watching the whole industry just go from paper charts to artificial intelligence. Like we're in a bizarre world now. It's crazy. Practices are becoming the cybernetic organism now. Now, aside from that, the human terrain matters the most. And I don't think anyone has navigated the human terrain and the psyche of a dentist in every facet of the practice probably than you. So getting to the common traits, right? Starting fundamentally, docs that you have found be successful. What is like a fundamental trait about just their mindset as a person?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I definitely see. I can tell. I know they have very similar traits. The biggest piece, and it comes down to leadership, but not that they have to be like a natural born like super leader. That's not it. The biggest trait I see is, the doctor who is very clear on their vision, very clear on what they want, very clear on how they want patients to feel when they leave their office, that we can build an office around. And if they and so I guess, as part of leadership, like the communication part of that. So it's not just having this vision in your head, it's being able to communicate that your vision to your community and your team members, so that you can really set the expectations and the culture of your practice right from the start. So I think feel like that, like foundationally, creating the vision and being able to communicate it. I think um, that's the biggest piece of it, and it's also something that, it doesn't matter if you're a startup or if you buy a practice, or or just you work in a practice an associate doctor. I think it all starts with the vision of what you want and how you want patients to feel when they leave. And again, it has nothing to do with your margins or clinical dentistry, because patients aren't going to judge you by that. They're not going to leave a review about how good your dentistry is. They're going to leave a review about how they feel when they leave there. So being very clear on that, I think, is number one, and it's something that you can start thinking about way before you get into practice ownership.
A really good point to that is, we just talked about the human train. What you're really talking about is how does the doc navigating the human train, the practice, right? And it's like, it's not just like, I think when the word vision comes up, they get really stuck on like the atmosphere of the practice and what comfort items we're offering, right? And I think there's another level to the vision that's kind of more granular of like, I want you to turn the room over this way because it's better for me to move faster to create a better patient experience. And I think some docs, um, you know, they're not extroverts, right? And they'll say, "Hey, let's do this," and then the DA will say, "Well, I did it this way because of this," and then in their head they go, "Well, you're a DA, I'm not. Let's do it that way." And docs listening, no, like you are the business leader. It's your practice. Don't let the practice run you. You run the practice. That doesn't mean be a tyrant. What that means is when somebody does something, you don't it's like, all right, well, you did this 70% the perfect the way I want you to do it. Let's find the other 30% and get it there. And I think the vision happens in every facet of the practice, from phone call to how the rooms are turned over. And docs, you guys have a bad habit of honestly rolling over to your staff and let them push you around.
Healthcare is going to create itself whether you do it on purpose or not. And so the best way to handle it is, for you to do it on purpose, because it's going to create itself. And having this vision is the foundation of that culture. Having the foundation of the culture, then you can build your systems around that. Build your systems so that it reflects that culture. But you've got to be very clear on the culture that you want. And you're right that doctors, if I were to ask a doctor, because most of them are like super science minded anyway, but if you were to ask a doctor, like, what's your mission statement or what's your vision, they usually come out with something like, to provide the best dental care in a technology driven friendly environment. Like they come out with something like that, like something super like science minded, and unfeeling. Um, but the vision needs to be like, I want every patient to leave here feeling like, um like they were heard and they weren't judged. I mean, you need to go like super like detailed into that so that your team understands like that their behavior, everything about what they're doing, reflects that. And then if you have rules and regulations, like, so obviously you have human resources and employee manuals, that with job descriptions and all that. Either they're doing their job or they're not. They're either following the rules or they're not, or they're showing up on time or they're not. Those are all the black and white things. If you have this vision also, and everyone's also clear on that vision, it becomes so much easier to manage people and create those systems, because now also either they're doing their job or they're not, but also they're a culture fit or they're not. They can help you with that vision or not. And it becomes much easier to, now managing people becomes easy. Now it's just about communication.
I've heard you say, I think to put it in simple terms, is the foundational part of a successful practice or of a successful doc is culture. And you can't have systems and processes before culture, right? So the foundation is that culture. And then after that is systems and processes. So let me ask you a question, because you're talking about managing people. Do you find that docs that can't manage themselves also can't manage their staff?
Although there have been some people who have surprised me. Like some people are natural leaders and some people aren't. And you're right, when most dentists are not extroverts. Um, and so part of it is also leading by example. I mean, you can't say this is the culture that I want, and you don't actually live that culture. So, we have open communication or whatever your culture there is, but yet your communication isn't open. Or we have a friendly atmosphere, but you don't say good morning to your team. I hear that you have to, once you define that culture, you have to live by it too.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to move on to my next question in a second, but you mentioned like you have to live by it too, right? I can't tell you how many docs I have where I talk to the office manager and I'm like, "What's going on with the morning huddle?" Because that's a foundational indicator, right? Like that's the first indicator. Like if you fail at morning huddle, a whole lot of other stuff sucks, right? Like that's like getting up and making your bed and brushing your teeth in the morning, right? It's like if you're skipping brushing your teeth, you definitely have bad breath. There's other indicators, right? So it's like I'll talk to the office manager and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, Doc's always late." I'll talk to
Right.
Doc and be like, "Hey man, you got to be in there 10 minutes prior." Well, like no excuse. I don't care. And I had a Doc who was on time all the time. His associate wasn't.
Mm,
He said, "Matt, what should I do?" I was like, "At 8:01, you lock the door, and he can't come in the
teach
building."
them a lesson. Yeah.
And he's like, "Really?" I was like, "Every day, all day. That's the standard. And he'll either start showing up or he's not a fit."
Mom and dad
And he
need to be
was
on the
like,
same page.
"Yeah." And he was like, man, that's extreme. And I was like, yeah, yeah. You want your practice to be successful? You got to go like you have a lot on the line, bro. You got student loans, the practice loan. Like, yeah, it takes extreme, right? So we talked about managing the people, right? After that mentality, like in an operational point of view, as far as like in the granular part of it, where do you think they have the biggest failure in like how they directly deal with their manager or how they view the systems and processes? I think would be next, because foundationally is the culture. Now, if we move up the pyramid the way you're talking about, because the culture is about being intentional, right? So now we move up to
Absolutely.
systems and processes. Where do you think the commonality failure or the commonality success? We're talking about success. The commonality success in systems and processes docs are after they get culture right. What do you find common in those people?
I find that, it's not really a set it and forget it kind of thing. But once you perfect something, once you hey, this really works. We're super efficient. Patients are having a really good experience. Once you perfect it, you now want to create a system out of it so it can be repeated. Now you want it to be repeatable, but also keeping in mind that you are in a constant state of improvement. And so you can't just create a process and then stick to it, because then at some point there's going to be a, why are we doing this? Oh, it's because it's always been the way we've always done it this way. And then you kind of get into that trap of, not not growing. So I find that, those that create the systems, and remain like firm in their systems, but yet flexible, like in the policy of it. So firm in principle, flexible in policy, kind of thing. And knowing that you're in a constant state of improvement and always looking for ways to improve. So creating the systems and then consistently testing the systems and analyzing the systems and making sure that they work. A lot of times the systems will be created and they'll create this nice like SOP manual and they'll print it out and put it in a binder, and then on the shelf it goes, and then no one ever looks at it again. And why are we doing it this way? Well, because it's the way we've always done it. So, It's not good enough to have systems if you don't understand why you have the systems and why you created it the way you did, and if you don't adjust them based on changes in technology or based on different flow of the office, different team members, things like that. So I guess constant analysis of the systems and and everything should have a system. I mean, like coming from marketing, like there's no sense in spending a ton of money on marketing if your team can convert them into appointments. Or if your team doesn't have a system to return phone calls or to people write in. If these systems are broken, then you're wasting money on marketing. So the systems need to be set up for success, shared with your team. They can't be in somebody's head, and they need to be constantly analyzed.
Yeah, and docs, you mentioned phone calls. More treatment is closed on follow up than in the operatory. Fact, fact, fact. Listen, if your team's not doing follow up, understand you're missing out on a whole lot of production. Going back to what you said about systems and processes, from what I heard was one, be very intentional. To always analyze it, because if you really want to grow, the way we do things at 50K a month in collections is different than 100K a month in collections, right? And what will happen is your staff will become the natural bottleneck for that because they will be resistant to change. And generally, I find leaders in the practice, what you just talked about was a check the box mentality. Like, we wrote it, we have a manual, we did this, we trained one time on it, check the box, that's done. It's not like when you're buying a couch for your house, you're like, that couch problem solved, I got a couch now. No, your kids keep throwing up on the couch. You have to clean the couch. Like, that's the equivalent, right? So I think, what I always talk about is we don't plan for now. We plan for where we want to be, right? I think that's the analysis you're talking about is like, okay, so we handled, 50 new patients a month this way. Now we're trying to get to 100 new patients a month, and we have to do things now for that. We can't cross that bridge when we get to it. And I find what happens is, I'd love to hear your point of view on this, is Doc allows his team to go back on autopilot to the way they did things before. And his manager is not being intentional like he wants to enforce his vision of how these granular things should be done on the form of SOPs. And he allows the check the box culture to trickle from him to the manager to the team. So would you say that all of this starts with Doc?
100%. And again, it goes back to if you have the vision in your head, the rest of the team doesn't know. The culture is going to create itself regardless. So it needs to be communicated on a regular basis. And if you yourself get complacent and just kind of box checking, your team is going to be too. And so a constant analysis of it, and there's this little piece of ownership. I think that people I think they have intentions of doing this, like, so giving themselves like admin time, giving themselves like dedicating some time to working on their business. And I think that, doctors think of it as, okay, that's when I'm going to do my bookkeeping or when I'm going to enter my things into QuickBooks. And that's not what it's about. Those are tasks, and those are tasks that can be delegated. No, you need to when you are doing the admin stuff of your office, it's not just about checking these boxes. It's about improving the culture, improving the process, making yourself more efficient, constantly analyzing, what you're doing so that you can make it better. And I find that, a lot of them don't work on it enough, or they view that special admin time, that's when they call in payroll, or that's when they're checking all those boxes. Like you said, it's more than that.
So let's profile a young doc, okay? And let's give this young doc advice, okay? So I'm a doc, and 4 years out of school. I worked at like a big DSO, Aspen, Heartland, somebody. I was on the front lines, trenches of warfare of dentistry, where they're dropping me from practice to practice. I don't really know the patients, and crap's just getting thrown on my plate, which honestly, in my opinion, develops the very best docs.
Absolutely.
Like, listen, I was at a mom and pop practice and I did this much production a day. Oh, awesome. I was in the throes of it, and I got 10 patients shoved on my calendar I shouldn't have, and I made it work. Bro, you're ready to own a practice, okay? You can roll with the punches, right? So let's talk about that guy. So this guy has had a good experience. He's 4 years out. Startup or purchase doesn't matter. He's now in ownership of a practice, okay? And he wants to set the culture and the systems and processes. On what frequency do you believe two things should happen? One, analyzation of it, and one, retraining.
And some of that depends because like a first year of ownership, it needs to be a little more frequently because in a constant state of growth. I mean, it needs to be something that is analyzed on a regular basis, and I would say monthly. Like, and even in the beginning, like the very beginning, I say daily. Okay, every day you need to take a look. What went well? Where are our trouble spots? What are we going to do to eliminate those trouble spots? As time goes on, it can be something that is done a little less frequently. Currently, some of my offices that have been open 5 or 6 years, it's something that will they will analyze more frequently like themselves, but as a team, they typically do it yearly. One of the things that we do, so you set that culture, everyone understands the culture, everyone knows the core values, and I like when team members like understand it so deeply that they can give examples of when they've seen another team member like live by those core values, or they can give examples and tell stories about how a team member exemplified those core values or the vision. And then so what is still working well, what do we need to improve on? And I find that getting your team involved in that, once you have a stable team, getting their input um, helps a lot. So for the doctor themselves, like this is something you need to do on a regular basis in the beginning of ownership. As time goes on, it can be a little less frequently, but it still needs to be something you do on a monthly basis or so. And I'm not talking about like change your policies monthly, right? Rewrite
No,
a
no, no,
whole
no.
SOP manual. I'm talking about analyzing these things, on a regular basis. And then I would say, like, as an existing office, like when it's working really well, I would still say that, yearly to, kind of revisit and retrain. But I believe that communication with your team and making sure that your team has a firm understanding of your vision and your culture, I believe that needs to happen frequently. I believe in monthly or quarterly, depending on the size of your team, one-on-one meetings where you can get people's input on the culture and what needs to be improved and what's going well. I believe that that is kind of communication is key to keeping a happy team and the cohesiveness of a team.
I think going back to the set it and forget it thing, it's real easy to fall. I mean, everything we've talked about so far is about a level of intentionality, right? And it's real easy to like fall into not doing it, right? So I can see why like you have to go analyze it, and I feel like Doc should probably take time, look at the policies himself, and look at his point of view, and then when he approaches, I think he should be prepared to approach these individuals before he does, right? Because one thing I think to be cautionary of is you meet with the office manager, right? And they say we should change these things about it. I think Doc needs to think about, and I would love your input on this, when they're saying these things, does it still lead to the end of the vision you want? When they say, I want to adjust this, don't allow it to adjust the target of what you want. You have to draw the map back. So when they say, I think we should do X differently, you have to be able to say back, well, that will change the outcome I want, and this is the outcome. So if it changes that, it's not valid. But if it improves the way we get there, then that is valid. So if you had to like coach a doc, like how should he prepare? How should he handle like on a granular level? How should he handle that conversation with that individual?
Yeah. So number one thing that you brought up that I think is really important is you really need to start with the end in mind. You really need to start with by you build your culture by knowing what you want in the end. You want to know what the result is. So one of the exercises that we'll bring a doctor through instead of saying, hey, what's the vision for your practice? We'll ask them like, um, you know, if somebody left you a review, for example, and it took your breath away, and you felt like this is what I've done this for, this is why I'm doing this. What does that review have to say about you and your practice and your team to make you feel like, yes, I nailed it? And so now we want every patient. to leave feeling that way. And that's what you build it around. And so if you then it becomes intentional because you know how you want people to feel, and then it allows you to analyze. Okay, people aren't feeling that way when they leave. Where is the breakdown? So you're right. If you're not getting that end result that you want, you need to fix what's going on in between. But you first need to be very clear on what you want that end result to be.
I always relate things back to military like things because of my background. And we do what's called planning from the X. So if we're gonna go hit a house and find a bad guy, we're gonna plan backwards from there. What's the weather that day? What aircraft do we have available? What team members are available? Do we have to bring a secondary team to run security at a different distance because of people moving through the area? And I think docs plan from where they are to where they want to go. Which the problem with that is you really don't get to highlight the stumbling blocks that way. You kind of run into them and encounter them as you go. Like, well, I didn't think about this. If you plan backwards to go, okay, well, if we increase patient flow, I have to decrease operatory time myself and talk less because doc, the number one killer of case presented is you not shutting up in the operatory, right? So it's like, yeah, the planning backwards from the X, I think, is a critical mindset shift because docs plan forward. And the other place where I think that falls down to also is I feel like in treatment planning, the clinical part of it, sometimes I find them planning from like one problem up rather than the patient's outcome down. And I think that thinking could be planned. I mean, honestly, that's just successful thinking in general. In everything you do, you should plan backwards from the X, right? So let's say, okay, we now have staff members who are just, let's say docs. So generally, if the staff members aren't doing what they should be, it's a leadership problem with you, doc. But let's say doc is doing it right. And he just has obstinate. Let's say he buys a practice. This doc buys a practice and he inherits the old staff. Always an awesome scenario, right? That's always great. And they're just fighting everything because the doc they worked for 20 years didn't do it that way. At what point should he just be like, how much time should he give where he's like, you're not working out? And how brave should he be in like how he approaches that problem with those individuals?
I'm the kind of person who gives people a chance. But I do feel as though, like, if you have communicated your vision clearly, you have communicated your core values clearly, and they still don't, either understand it, agree with it, recognize it, live by it, then they need to go. They're not a fit. They're not a good culture fit. And that needs to happen fairly quickly. If it's And again, doing this helps it makes firing people easier because they're either doing their job or they're not, or they're a culture fit or they're not. And you can make if you're very clear on this, you can make a decision very quickly. These are our values. You're not living by these values. You're not a fit.
And I think there's an indicator that doc, if he internally feels this, it's time for the person to go. If you feel like you're held hostage by this individual, it's time to kill him and get rid of him.
It's tough right now because people are feeling like I don't have a lot of options. I only had two applicants, or I don't. Well, rewrite the ad, and I'd rather you have no one. I'd rather you have no one than someone who's going to hurt your reputation.
And I think that doc feels like, well, listen. One thing I'll tell you is we grow practices, right? And you guys do too. And we take practices from 100K to 200K a month in 6 months, right? And then doc has this thing where like, I have to hire up. I have to hire up. I have to hire up. No, you can't hire up. We're going to find systems and processes to make you more efficient, right? Well, if you're doing 80 to 100K a month and you go down a staff member and you think your world's going to fall apart, going back to what we talked about earlier, you're not embracing your systems and processes and adjusting. If you are reviewing them, adjusting, you can review them and say, okay, we're down to DA, but we still have to do 100K a month. So now we have to analyze our processes. Let's retrain as a team, and let's find a better way to work around this person not being here and not have the system break. If you think losing any staff member breaks your system, then you have not done any of those foundational things.
Exactly. And if your systems are all in your head, then training that next person becomes, that much more difficult. You should be reviewing your systems, so frequently that it doesn't matter when the new person starts. You could, and I know I talked about how, not having that binder and doing, but in theory, like a visual, you should be able to hire for personality, and then and loyalty and culture, and you should be able to hand them this that manual. You should be able to hand them your systems, and they should just be able to do it. It should be so descriptive, and that you should be able to hand it, and they can work in your office on from day one.
One thing I was thinking about as you were saying that is docs, like they tend to, how do I word this? They they kind of tend to like, here's just the manual. You should know it, right? And there should be like a, here's a manual and here's a one-on-one with me about how we should be doing this, because you got to transfer that energy and that emotion to them, and start the relationship that way. And if you're just like, hey, here's the manual, and you're also expecting your manager to do that, I believe the manager is a tool for you. They're not the leader, right? And it's like, doc, like, be proactive. And I think coming through all this, it's intentionality on these things is the underlying real fundamental problem. After hearing you talk about it, is we just get very unintentional very fast. And there's nothing, doc, when you're hiring. So Stacey said something really critical, and me and Stacey watch staff changes in hundreds of practices. Like I'll go work with a practice, and the manager I trained a month ago is gone, or the case presenter is gone. I got to do it all over again, right? So we've watched this happen a ton. And when she talks about like hiring based on personality, if you get the right human, and this comes from like my special operations background, if you're a good fit for the team, we can teach you the tactical stuff,
Right.
right? We can, that we can teach. What docs do is they do it wrong. They hire for the tactical ability or the operational ability, and don't hire for fit in with the team. I'll give you guys one other word of advice. And I say this to managers, and they hate it. I'll have a manager I'm training, and they'll say something like this: well, I've been in dental 30 years. I've never done it this way. And my response is, and people hate this, is, well, you can do things for 30 years and be mediocre at it. Like, experience doesn't equal good. Doc, when you're hiring, experience does not equal good. It doesn't. Listen, Stacey Peters, 30 years in dentistry. Matt Brown, 5 years in dentistry, right? They, like our brains, I'm not on your level, but like my brain isn't any less dental developed because of it. I just applied it differently in a different time period, right? Like a 30-year office manager is not a good purchase, in my opinion. You're buying a used car with problems. You're buying a car with a slipping transmission, and it sputters and stalls out every now and then because it's doing things the way we did it 30 years ago.
You're buying someone else's culture.
You are, like, don't do it. Like, and honestly, at my company, we stopped kind of hiring on the outside. We just hire from within and go from bottom to top. And like, listen, that front desk person that's doing a great job, that's good on the phones, they may only been doing dentistry a year or 2 years, but guess what? They might be your best option for a practice manager instead of trying to hire outside. It's easier to hire for a front desk person. That person that's in front of you that you already value, give them a shot.
Develop the right personality. Yeah.
Yeah, they're already in your culture. Like, them already having the culture, them already knowing you, that is way more valuable than 20 years of experience.
100%.
Right. And it's like, I think me and you both would agree that like the industry standard thinking on this stuff is completely flawed.
Agreed.
It just is. Right. So, hey guys, we had Stacey on today. We have to wrap it up. This is a good 35-minute episode, guys. It's really impactful for your mindset on dealing with your team. Stacey, before we sign off, one, how's a good way to contact you if someone wants to ask you a question or wants your opinion on something, since you're such an awesome brain in dentistry? And is there anything you want to share before we go?
Yes, actually, I do have a couple of things to share. Stephen Treader, owner of Ideal Practices, he keep an eye out for some of he's going to be coming out with a series of podcasts. We will also be having our Start Practice Blueprint course in April, and we're going to do it virtually instead of in person this year. Hoping that more people will be able to attend for not traveling. And the other thing is, I have developed an office manager course with Laura Johnston with My Dental SOP. So Ideal Practices, My Dental SOP. Yep, we have
Awesome.
developed a a certificate course for those who want to become office managers or those who want to like expand their skills as an office manager. And that course will be starting in March. You can always reach me by email. My email is Stacey with an E, Stacey at idealpractices.com.
Thank you so much for being on, buddy. It's always fun to spend time together. It's infrequent we get to anymore. It sucks. If I could talk to you once a month and we both had time, I would. Hey guys, remember please, me and Dr. Val and all the hosts on the channel, Zach, Shelley, Kirk Teach Out, Dr. Sasha, all the hosts of the different shows. No one's paid for this. There's no sponsors. I've never allowed a sponsor. Ideal Practices did not pay for Stacey to be on here. I selected her because we're old friends. Please like, share, subscribe, and leave us a review. That is the best way you guys can thank us for the podcast, and this really means a lot to us, guys. Thank you all, and have a great day.
I love it. Thanks, Matt.